Hi guys, I'm Beth and this is Read Remark, and today we're going to talk about Putney by Sofka Zinovieff. Alright, so you might as well buckle in for this one because I have some thoughts. Again, we're going to talk about Putney by Sofka Zinovieff. Just a disclaimer to sensitive viewers, I usually try to make my videos clean enough that high schoolers can watch it, and I don't think that this necessarily disqualifies high schoolers, but anyone who is sensitive to sexual assault or sexual content should be aware of that going into both this review and the book. There is both of those things, so consider yourself warned. Putney is one of those books that has left me greatly affected and greatly grossed out in equal measures. Here's a quick rundown of the plot. There's a man who is about 30 years old. He is a famous composer who has famous friends in the artistic world, including a man who is prominent in the art world and has a wife and a family, several kids. He goes over to their house one night for dinner, comes across the man's 9-year-old daughter, Daphne, 9 years old. He's instantly smitten with Daphne and decides that she must henceforth be his muse because he just cannot get past how attracted he is to both her beauty, her spirit. Everything about her just calls to him and his artistic spirit. And so he enters into this age of incorporating her into his music compositions, and also this age into having increasingly sexual interactions with her, starting with a kiss that's kind of chaste and then grows from there in severity. It's kind of gross. It's kind of gross. When they first have sex, she's like 12 or 13 years old. Now they live almost a sort of bohemian lifestyle. The parents have this open relationship. Daphne kind of roams free. And it's a very artistically based world that they live in. They seek out beauty and truth and poetic nature in all things. And so he sees his relationship with Daphne as being beautiful and loving and artistic. And Daphne, who is just a child, sees it the same way. Of course, they have to keep it top secret because such a relationship would be highly unapproved of. Now, I thought of this book several different ways. I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be sort of a Lolita 2.0, but even later in the book, the main character says to himself, "I'm no Humbert Humbert." It's like he has this refusal at self-awareness for the situation. I also was trying to figure out if it was some sort of justification for this adult-child relationship, such as the one we find in All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood, which everybody seemed to love and thought was so beautiful, and I thought was just bleh. I thought it was gross. I don't understand the justification for this older guy who knows darn well better to enter into this sexual relationship with a 13-year-old. It just I never could justify that in my head. And so I couldn't tell if in Putney the author was trying to do the same thing, was to make this a relationship of beauty and justified, where it's okay because it's art. It's art, it's love, it's not child molestation. Please. I was also kind of questioning this manic zeal that Daphne's best friend of years, Jane, was having throughout the book. It seemed almost like the book was kind of trying to demonize her a little bit because she was constantly pushing for Daphne to say something or go against all of what was happening to her, to the point that while sometimes she seemed like the voice of reason, at other times she seemed like a voice of vengeance. And so I wasn't quite sure what the author was getting at with that. However, let me say that it all comes around and everything the author does is done purposefully. It's all done on purpose. There's a reason for everything she puts into the book, and I think that this is brilliant what she does. It's a 5-star read for sure. Putney is one of those books that follows a long time period. It starts all the way back when Daphne is 9 years old and goes up into when she's in her 50s. And it's actually not until she's 50 years old that it suddenly hits her that this sexual relationship she had with this man, 20 years her senior, was not a sexual relationship at all. It was sexual assault. It was rape. She is shocked. She goes to the authorities and doesn't really get much support except from Jane, who is just over the moon, happy that Daphne has finally come to her senses and is doing something about this rapscallion Ralph. But Daphne's own family, her father says, don't tell, I mean, the guy's old, there's no point in doing it now. Ralph himself is like, but we were in love. It wasn't like that. She gets almost no support from anyone else. It really made me think about this recent discussion that's been happening in the media of why women don't tell about these sexual assaults that happened to them until decades later. Reading this fictionalized account of what happened with Daphne really made it come home that much more to me. They don't tell because people don't believe them. They don't tell because people don't validate their feelings. They tell them not to say anything. They don't support them. They don't believe them. Or they say that they're ruining the man's life and legacy by talking up, by speaking up, as if the victim has now become a perpetrator of sorts. And it's just this backwards logic that keeps women from saying anything in the first place. And it's really unfortunate and really sad. Now, Daphne herself was a little bit frustrating at times because she felt so conflicted about the whole thing. When she first realized that it was assault or rape, she was upset, angry, hurt, and ready to run to the authorities, shout it from the mountaintops, do whatever she needed to do. But then as the lack of support was coming through from her family, from people who knew her, that conviction kind of waned. It wavered. She began to feel much more complicated feelings about it. That was kind of frustrating to me because I, like her friend Jane, wanted her to shout it from the mountaintops and bring Ralph to swift, brutal justice. But it's understandable. It's understandable what Daphne was feeling because things like this are never a clean cut and dry case. The justification that Ralph has in his mind of his love towards Daphne is that she is his muse. He loves her most of all. She is the beauty that brings life to his art. It really made me think about the role of Muse a whole lot more, and indeed I've read some articles since Putney where actual artists' muses have spoken up and talked about how the experience was not always a great one. The definition of a muse is basically this person, usually a person, who acts as sort of a touchstone for an artist, who inspires the artist to bring that much more life to his or her art. And usually it is a beautiful young woman. Not always, but a lot of times it is. In the case of Putney, it was this 9-year-old girl, Daphne. Now the problem with the muse, while it sounds beautiful and like she is an integral part of this art that is happening, what actually happens is that if someone is put in the role of muse, they're basically existing as nothing more than an object to inspire the artist. They don't really have their own complications, their own feelings, their own lives in that role. They exist more as a catalyst for the artist. It's basically the artist is important, the muse is just a little byproduct that the artist can look to. So maybe this sort of denial that Daphne had was spurned for decades by this thought that she wasn't being raped, she was being a muse. Now that's not always to say that the role of muse is a bad or sexually devious one. It isn't. You know, if the muse knows exactly what their role is in that relationship, then it can lead to beautiful works of art, music, whatever sort of thing that it produces. But if you're in this intense relationship with the artist, it's hard to exist outside of that role as muse. It's hard to have your own identity, which was the case in Putney. So I hope some of you guys have also read Putney because it's one of those books that I keep coming back to in my mind. It just really touched something in me that it was so thought-provoking. Even when I finished it, I had to take a beat and just ponder it for a moment. Big kudos to the author, Sofka Zinovieff. Definitely a good book. I hope you all enjoyed this review. If you did, be sure and give me a like and subscribe, and I will catch you all next time. Thanks for watching as always. Bye. Please.